The Paracave Podcast, proudly brought to you by major sponsor Jack's Pale Ale, exclusively available at Parramatta Eels Club, Shannon Cooney from Glenmore Park Realty, BTZD Clothing, and the official media partner of the Paracave Podcast, the Parramatta Times.
Welcome to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. And now over to your host, Troy Warner, broadcasting live from the world-famous Paracave.
And yes, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. Troy Warner here, and it is the interview-based podcast which comes out each and every Thursday. And this week it is with a premiership winner from the Parramatta Eels, who he was a part of the 1981 premiership winning team for the Parramatta Eels, the very first winning premiership team for the Eels in 1981, and actually scored a try in that game as well. So what a big thrill that was to score a try in a grand final, and it being the first ever Parramatta Eels winning grand final. And that player is Mr. Graeme Atkins. Now, this is a really interesting story for myself because I grew up watching rugby league from 1986, and that was Graeme's second last season of rugby league. And he started with the Parramatta Eels in 1975, and he played in the grand final in 1976 against Manly, and also played against the Dragons, both in the 1977 grand final and also the grand final replay as well. So it is a little bit of an interesting story for myself, and particularly maybe for younger listeners of the podcast who are interested in finding out about the Parramatta Eels, because he does, during this podcast, he does talk about those earlier years from in the 70s, mid-70s, late 70s, into the 80s, and also all the way through his career to the 1987 season. Played 179 games for both the Parramatta Eels and the Eastern Suburbs Roosters, as they were known back in the day. Scored 48 tries, kicked 22 goals as well. So a pretty handy player. Represented New South Wales City Seconds in 1977. Is also the father of current NRL referee Mr. Grant Atkins. So I do ask him a little bit about that, and you can hear for yourself about how he responds to those questions. I didn't want to delve too much into it because I wanted to hear about his career, and also I don't think he probably wanted to talk about it a lot as well. But there is a couple of questions in there about Grant and refereeing as well. So anyway, that is enough of me talking at the moment. This wouldn't be at all possible without the sponsors. I should mention those. They are a great help of the podcast. Jack's Pale Ale, exclusively available at Parramatta Eels Club. Shannon Cooney from Glenmore Park Realty. BTZD Teamwear. Also League Tees as well as the Parramatta Times, the official media partner of the Paracave Podcast. So thank you very much for your help with the podcast. I really appreciate it. And look, as Hindy says,
get a beer, coffee, whatever you want.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy, and let's get straight into it. And today on the podcast, I've got a very exciting guest, as he played at the club that I love, the Parramatta Eels, is also a member of the first ever Parramatta Eels premiership winning team, and has played in a couple of other grand finals before that as well, and is a life member of the Parramatta Rugby League Club as well. Welcome to the Paracave Podcast, Mr. Graeme Atkins.
Yeah, thanks, Troy.
Not a problem. Thank you very much for joining me. Now, going back to the start of your career, did rugby league find you, or did you find rugby league? How did you become to play the great game?
Oh, mate, I think it's a bit of both. My dad had played a couple of lower grades games at Parramatta, and I just think in those days everyone played. I played for Parramatta Marist.
Okay.
From when I was about 8, and then I was lucky enough to be at Marist Brothers up to year 12, and had a few good games and played a lot of junior reps. And I think the bottom line is that everyone in those days just wanted to play for Parramatta.
And is that the way that you ended up playing first grade for Parramatta, just slowly making your way up through the grades?
I'd played Matthews and Ball and Flegg. I was a halfback in those days, and I was lucky enough I was captain of the 3 teams, and then I played for a couple of years at Toongabbie, and ran into a fella called Neville Glover.
Oh, yes.
And Nev and I played, he's a year older than me, played together in C grade, and he said, Graham, I'm thinking of going to try and out for grade. He said, would you come with me? I said, I'll just go there to keep me company, Nev, but I'm not going to make it. And fortunately enough, that both Neville and I were graded in 1975.
That's right, and you made your debut in 1975 against West in a playoff, and then 8 games in 1976, including a few minutes in the grand final. Before the game, what was the build-up like in the Parramatta area, as it was their first ever grand final?
I think it just did so much for the district. It really cemented the passion that people had for the region, and I think it did a lot for the older people, like my dad's era. It did a lot for my mates, and that suddenly every game you went to Cumberland Oval, you couldn't get in.
Okay.
But the most important thing, I think, was for the younger kids coming up that they'd be at the games wearing the blue and gold, and they wear it to school and all that. And I think it was just a real good recognition of Western Sydney. Yep. And I think that it did more for the district than I think anything else that's happened out there.
And probably Neville Glover will probably hate me for saying this, but what were you thinking when he dropped the ball over the line, and that probably would have won the game for the Eels?
Well, look, I was on the field at the time.
Yep.
The bottom line is Parramatta would not have got to the grand final if it hadn't have been for Neville. And that's what people, they see one pass, but Neville had got Parramatta to that grand final. And people don't want to think about that.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, for someone who's probably a little bit younger, that's what I know Neville for. So it's good that you mentioned that for sure, for the, I guess, younger Parramatta fans as well that didn't watch the game in those days. As you mentioned there, you were on the field there. Could you believe that in your 9th game of first grade that you were playing in a grand final at the SCG?
It's still very, very surreal. It was really surreal to be able, the first time I ran out onto Cumberland Oval. But look, I think it's just luck. It's fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. There's a lot better footballers that I ever was that didn't get graded. Okay. And once again, I'm just very, very fortunate to have been in an era of wonderful friends like Neville and Bob O'Reilly and all that at the right time, right place at the right time.
Do you think Parramatta were going to go one better in 1977, making the grand final against St George? Were you confident?
Look, we'd played well. We'd been the most consistent team through the year, and then the first drawn grand final. '77, and then I think probably in the replay, it was probably a game that we weren't prepared for.
Okay.
Because there was, looking at the games nowadays, there were a few incidents that would have resulted in players not being on the field or being suspended.
Yeah.
But once again, St George had the plan to make sure that we were rattled, and they certainly did that in probably a way we weren't used to playing.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you sense though, making the grand final in '76 and '77, could you sense then that something was potentially building at the club? Because '78, '79, Parramatta make finals again, and yeah, could you sense that something was building there? And what do you think it was that Parramatta were probably lacking just to go to that next step?
Look, I think probably self-belief. We were lucky enough to have recruited some players out of the district. We'd bought Ray from Rugby Union.
Yep.
Mick had come up, and I think there was probably things missing. Like Terry Fernley was a wonderful man. He'd probably didn't have the killer in him, and in 1980, Johnny Peer took over, and this first year I don't think we made the finals.
No.
And then this fella called Jack Gibson arrived, and everyone was holding their breath when Jack arrived, and he probably gave the confidence to us that we needed, that we had the potential there. We had people like Ray, and Mick and Steve Ella, and he brought in a few seasoned players like Kev Stevens, and Bobby O'Reilly came back, and then of course our captain Steve Edge came over for that year, and he was a definite winner and a leader, and it just changed and gave the younger players the opportunity and the structure that we needed.
What were your first thoughts when you found out that Jack Gibson was coming to coach the club? Because I've heard that a few players were thinking, oh no, what's going to happen here?
Exactly. And I was the same. Like I'd played first grade, from about 75 to 79, and in 1980, I'd only got on the field once in first grade, and I've gone, oh no, and to for a long time I thought, oh, what's going to happen? And luckily, I got on in first grade in one game.
Yep.
And a fellow called Les Boyd,
oh yes,
came running at me, and as he did, Ronnie Hilditch hit him beautifully and stunned Les. So, being the big brave winger I am, I picked Les up while he was still staggering and dumped him on his back.
Yeah.
And Jack loved that.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I ended up playing the rest of the season in first grade, thanks to Ronnie.
That's a classic story. Is there a classic Jack Gibson story that a go-to story that you can tell about him on the podcast?
Yeah. Look, at the end of '82, I still had a year to go running on a contract to Para, and I didn't make the cut.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I went to East for a couple of years, and then our first game at the old sports ground, we were playing against Parramatta, and I'm playing against all my mates, and I'd even driven to the game with Eric. I'd driven into the sports ground, and anyhow, cut a long story short, we were in the dressing room, and I was picked a fullback, and here I am playing against all my mates.
Yep.
And I remember, Mersey belted me once and got up laughing. And anyhow, I'd had a really, really good game at fullback, and I think we got beaten by 3 points. And anyhow, after the game, I'm in the dressing room and getting changed next to my mate Mike Eden, and next thing the whole dressing room went quiet. And no one could work out what it was. And anyhow, Jack walked in.
Okay, yeah.
And Jack's walked up to me and said, "Great game, Graeme," shook my hand, and then walked out. And things like that, everyone was still dumbfounded because Jack was an enigma for the game. And I think just something like that, the recognition really showed what type of man he was. And, what the person you saw interviewed when he wouldn't talk and that was not the man that he was really like.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And so to me that's essentially what Jack was like.
Were you a part of the team meetings in the bus that Jack had?
Oh, yeah.
That was a bit different, wasn't it?
Oh, it was different because at Granville Park we'd get there and we'd have to get on the bus, and the first thing you did before you sat down, you looked to see whether there were spiders or ants or something on the seats and all of that. But once again, it was the very close bond that Jack and Mass created for the group, where he divided us into the 3 grades into 4 teams, so players from first grade, second grade and under 23s. And we trained in those groups. Yep. And then, so we were training. If you were playing first grade, you were training, and you spent the whole session training with someone who might have been on the reserves for under 23s.
Okay, yeah.
It then meant if there was a transition that you were called up, you already knew some of the players that you're playing with.
Yeah.
And so it became a real club. And I think Jack had, he was really the catalyst that lit the wick that started that 1980s era.
Well, we now see that bus immortalised in Parramatta Square now. It's a big monument there. So anytime anyone's in Parramatta Square, they can go past the bus and remind them of that glory era. And speaking of that glory era, 1981, that was the first premiership that Parramatta had won.
The first grade one, yeah.
Yeah, first grade one, I should say, yes. Yeah. Yourself scored a try. That must have been pretty special to score a grand final try in that first premiership win.
Yeah, like I'd played in the 76 and 77 when we lost, and there was I think only Bob and Mick might have been there, and it was really I suppose they had one more thing to tick off, and we did that, but I still remember for us the greatest thrill was winning it, but coming back and seeing the faces on the supporters.
Okay, yeah.
I'd been them when they've been sad and disappointed, and they never gave up. And I think that was that went through the entire team and the reserve grade and anyone else who was there. It was we did it for the people. We did it for the people of Parramatta, and I think that we've always held that very, very important in our direction. That the people and the supporters are the ones that were the important ones.
Well, I've certainly heard some crazy stories about the fans and the team trying to get back into the Leagues Club. That was masses of people along Parramatta Road and the like. Tell us about the celebrations. Who was the best on ground for celebrating and the actual celebrations at the club?
Oh, look, I think for us, we're still very, very good mates, very close mates. But I think it was, I don't know, each has their own little characteristics, and I think like Brett Kenny's the one who always cracks me up. probably the most naturally talented athlete I've ever seen. But I think we loved celebrating with the fans, with the supporters, and the reason we did that is because we had such a close bond together, and there was no one any better than anyone else, and that's one of the things that Jack always drummed into us, that you're not going to win as an individual, you'll win as a team, and when you needed your mates, they'd be there. And that was essentially why Parramatta was so good. That if someone dropped a ball or missed a tackle, you know that your mate would back you up.
Did you think that Parramatta had won the game when Brett Kenny went over for his second try?
Oh, look, it's funny. At half time, I think we were down.
Yeah.
And anyhow, we've gone in and the normal half time and that. And Jack walked in, he looked at us, looked up and down, smiled and said, "You'll win this," and walked out.
Wow.
And that then gave the confidence to us.
Yeah.
And the second half was completely different. And so in that way, Jack was... Yeah, he's a really, really good psychologist.
Okay,
I don't think he could probably even spell the word, but he just knew, and we did it for each other, and we did it for the supporters. We didn't do it for ourselves.
Yeah, and look, it must be pretty special knowing that you're a part of the first ever premiership winning team for the Parramatta Eels. They can't take that off you.
Yeah. I think any person who was fortunate enough to be gifted to wear a blue and gold jersey, that's something that's really, really special. And even though, they're not, Parramatta aren't doing overly well this year, but it's still for us. I remember the first year that I got graded, that I didn't even realise we got paid for it. All I wanted was my jersey.
Yeah.
To be able to take home and give it to my kids.
Ah, nice. Yes. Do they have the grand final jersey?
Yeah. Well, it's a bit hard
somewhere.
It's a bit hard for Grant. He can't really show his bias.
Yeah.
But he's got mine, one of them, and my other son has the other, and my two daughters have got different parts of the gear that I've had from the 1980s or 70s.
Ah, nice. Well, just mentioning Grant there, 1982. He was born, but that season was a little bit tough for yourself, wasn't it? Because you played in the prelim, but it must have been disappointing not to make the grand final side.
The best thing was that, like I said, the highlight for me was Grant being born, which I had to give up a first grade spot to go to his birth.
Okay. Yeah.
but the lovely thing was that my best mates are people like Neil Hunt, Eric's still a good mate, and Brad Williams at that time. But it made no difference, because as long as Parramatta were winning, my mates were in there. That's all that mattered. Okay. And so we didn't have nasty competition against each other. If we weren't playing well enough and we were put down, well, so much. That's the way it is. And we had a good reserve grade team with Johnny Money and that. And so once again, and it was then up to us to make our way back up.
You just supported the players that were in that team because you wanted to see Parramatta win.
Yes, that's right. And and it was. And like I said, we had good mates that were playing first grade down to guys who were on the bench and under 23s. They were still mates. They still wore the same jersey. And, things like that really kept that bond and that mateship together.
And also, speaking about Grant, he's a current NRL referee. How do you, as a parent, handle criticism that's thrown Grant's way when he has a bad performance?
I don't watch the game.
Okay.
I won't watch it, and it's the same thing. I used to watch it, but the minute something negative is said, I turn it off.
Yep. Must be difficult.
Yeah, like once again, he's an intelligent. Well, he's an intelligent man. I'm biased. I still believe he's the best referee, but I was lucky enough to go away last year up to Townsville with him, and I met some of the other referees, and the lovely thing, and even some of the ladies that were there, they were just such nice people. Really, it just reminded me of when we played, that they were a group of people that looked out for each other, and I think the interaction that they had was very, very admirable. And once again, it's just the luck of being chosen.
Yeah, it's certainly a hard gig being an NRL referee, because you're scrutinised all the time by commentators, fans, media personalities, all the time.
Yeah. You very, very seldom hear a positive thing said about a referee, and that's disappointing, because it is the game wouldn't operate without those people, and it was the less a referee has to do in a game, the better. It should be up to the players. They know what to do. They know what's right and what's wrong, and sometimes I think that their actions are a response to what their coaches are asking for or what's expected in the press.
You mentioned there that you turn it off. Do you still watch NRL today, though?
No.
No?
Okay. It's funny, like, what I said earlier about that when Neville and I were there, we played to get a jersey at the end of the year, and we would have played for nothing to get that jersey. I really have an issue now with people going to places where they get paid more money.
Yeah.
I find it very, very difficult to like, it's a game. It's not a job. Like, it's going to last for 10 years. And what do these players then do? And things like that really irk me, because I don't think a lot of the clubs are looking after the long time future of the players.
Okay. Yeah.
And like when I was there, a fellow called Ron Morley was the secretary manager of the club. He called me in. I hadn't signed. He said, "Look, we'd like to sign him up for next year," and said, "You go to university, don't you?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Look, here's $500. Okay, that's your signing on fee. I need you to bring me the receipt from the university for your fees." So I went and paid my uni fees and came back and showed Ron the receipt. I said, "Mate, why do that?" He said, "Because your future is the important thing."
Okay, yeah, no, that's...
Yeah, and things like that are the ones that I really, I know there are the welfare groups and all that, but I wonder how well they actually take care of the players once they leave the arena.
Yeah, no, I have heard that back in the 80s, players were more wanting to win a premiership than go to another club, potentially for a little bit more money. And I have heard that classic story from Ray Price about when Sterling and Kenny and others were offered a contract at Manly, and he they told Ray, and he said, well, if you go there, I'm going to beat the crap out of you 2 times a year, and I'm going to win more games than you, and stuff like that. And that was a classic story that he said. I have heard that, but you're right. These days, it is a business, and it can be, players can leave for more money, and it's disappointing because when you think about it, it is about the football and winning premierships. I mean, understandably, players have got to look for their future as well, and their families, look after their families as well. But sometimes, at the end of the day, it's all about winning comps.
Well, it is. Like I said, when I grew up at Girraween, the people would go past the street and wish me all the best, and they were people who lived down the street. And I think that's essentially what Parramatta was in those days, and that's what Penrith is now, and that's why they're doing so well, is that they have the local community being part of it, and the players are part of that community. And look, I know that it would be a ideal situation as everyone played for where they grew up, but we were just part of an era that was really, really important to us.
Was it disappointing to have to leave Parramatta and go to the Roosters in '83? Yeah,
like I'd found out. I think actually the Monday before the first game, I found I still had a contract. I found I hadn't been graded.
Yeah.
And anyhow, one of the fellas in the media got in touch with me and said, "Look, East are interested," and I went there and I've made some. I'm glad I did, because I really made some good long-term mates, Mike Eden, Kevin Hastings, and all that, and it also changed my attitude. Like I've certainly got a lot fitter than I'd ever been before, and like I had a wonderful 2 years, and people like Ron Jones and the people at East made me feel welcome, but there was still this little blue and gold fire burning. I'd played 98 first grade games, and I wanted to get the 100.
Yeah.
And that's when, in I think '85, I got in touch with the club then, and John Money, who had coached me before, and he said, "Yeah, we'd love to have you back." And coming back, and there was a few of the fellas playing over in England. So I was fortunate enough to get my 100th first grade game up back at Para, which was something that was really important to me. And eventually I was able to bring people like Mike Eden back, Tim Barnes, and then that was kind of the second era of Para for those, I think, 3 or 4 years I had.
Yeah, that's right, because 1986 Parramatta pretty much won everything on offer. It must have been the midweek comp, the minor premiership, the club championship. No doubt it would have been a good time and feeling to be around Parramatta in that year, 1986.
Yeah, well, that was also the year I think Crow got the poke in the eye.
That's right, yeah.
And they couldn't find a goal kicker. So I put my hand up.
Okay, yeah. Was
and
it something that you've always done, or you
no.
just thought you'd give it a crack?
Well, someone had to do it, and so we had a kick-off between Johnny Muggleton and I, and I beating him, and I ended up, and I think I was the leading point scorer for Parramatta that year.
Nice.
And but once again, it was something that you had to do. You did it for your mates, you did it for your club, and you did it for the people, the supporters.
Yeah, that's right. Well, 1986, Parramatta make the grand final again against Canterbury. Yep. You played in the semi-final a couple of weeks before. Was it just a case of competition for that other wing spot, as Eric Grace would have sewn up one spot? Mick Delroy ended up getting that spot, but was
Yeah.
it just a case of competition for that spot?
Oh, look! I think they were playing so well. I was 30. I was 30 that year, so I lost a bit of my speed if I ever had any. And it was just good mateships, and I'll never forget. I think Eric or Mick got knocked out in the grand final, and Johnny Money came up to me and looked, and I looked over and saw, I think Tony went on, and I said no, and to give Tony the opportunity, I'd already had one,
Yeah.
and so Tony had the opportunity to go on and play in the grand final. But once again, it was something that I'd had my time, and I wanted someone else to be able to enjoy the fortune I'd had in the earlier years.
Ah, nice. That's very gracious of yourself, and I guess that'd be pretty. Tony Chalmers would have been very grateful for that opportunity that you said for him to go on.
I don't even think he knew.
Okay.
But the bottom line is that, at the age of 30, everyone has a use by date, and and like I was fortunate enough to have had be part of so many great achievements I was at Para, and it was someone else's turn.
Was that then why in '87, after a 12-year career, you knew it was time to retire?
I think you know when the writing's on the wall. I was 31, and everyone has a use by date.
Yeah,
and I know that my time had come up, and then we looked at the club, and there were so many wonderful younger players that had come up who were certainly a lot faster, a lot smarter, and they have their future ahead of them. And it's always been a real legacy of mine to remember the first time I ran onto Cumberland Oval, and that's something that people can never take away from you.
What's your favourite memory of Cumberland Oval?
The cricket pitch.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because when I talked to players at other clubs, that they hated it.
Yeah.
And I must admit, I played one game where I watched and players would run it up and then directly go left or right so they wouldn't get tackled on the pitch, and the tacklers wouldn't hit the ground on the pitch either, so they just let them down nice and easily.
What did you do, just run straight?
No, I kept away from it. That's why I stuck to the wing. I didn't want to get near the cricket pitch.
Was wing your favourite position to play throughout your career?
Well, I'd played all my junior rep football as halfback.
Okay, yeah.
And I could run. It's amazing when you're really, really scared how fast you run. And so they put me on the wing because they couldn't fill it, and lucky enough I could see, being a halfback, you can see what's happening, and I had good hands, and I could kick, and I could run, I could step, and so it just happened to fill a void or what they needed at the time. Like Terry Fernley saw the potential, and then when he took over first grade, he showed confidence in me.
And the rest is history.
That is, yeah.
When you did retire, players of your era did actually work and play at the same time, but when you did retire from playing, how hard was it to make that transition just into a normal working life?
Well, I started teaching at Patrician Brothers at Playtown in '79, and so it was no different. Like, I had a full-time job there, and I remember I'd get up Monday morning, going to work, and I'd have broken fingers and black eyes and getting heckled by the kids about losing on the weekend, and And it was just part of the, part of what we had to do in life. We had to get up to work on a Monday morning with injuries, and once I remember a fella called Chris Close need me in the ribs in a midweek game, and I went to work next day with 4 broken ribs. Ooh. And I had to have showers twice in the day to take the pain away, but I didn't want to let the kids down and the school down. So that's what you did in those days. And it's not just me being a hero, because all of the players did that. I had to get up, work, with Ray, with his building, with Mick, with the pub, and they all had to do the work on the Monday, which nowadays they have days to recover and all that, and don't have a second job to go to.
That's unlike Choppy Close to be kneeing someone or back slapping someone, isn't it?
I think.
But that was the era, wasn't it, when those sort of things happened?
Yeah. I think I must have been the danger man, and he delivered. No, that's probably the worst thing. They actually had to cut my jersey off.
Okay, wow.
In the dressing room, and it broke my heart to see a Parramatta jersey getting cut up.
Oh, it would do for me as well, but 4 broken ribs. That would have been very painful.
Yeah.
Now you don't have to answer this question if you don't want to, but in your opinion, if an Eel was to be made an immortal of rugby league, which player would you choose? Because in my belief, there should be one of those 80s players included as an immortal, and there's any number of players that you could probably choose, like Brett Kenny, Peter Sterling, Ray Price, Mick Cronin, Eric Gross, Steve Ella. The list goes on. But as I said, you don't have to answer it if you don't want to. But if there was to be one, who would you choose?
Is that the rugby league immortal?
Yeah. So I think it currently stands at 13 or 14. I think it is.
Well, this might sound funny. Is Crow in there or not?
No, he's in the Hall of Fame, I believe.
Right.
So there's no Eels player as a rugby league immortal.
Like I'd say people like Ray, but one person I'd probably, it might be out of left field, but it is someone who does so much for rugby league, doesn't matter what club. Someone like Stephen Edge.
Okay, yeah.
Like we any function charity function that we go to, Steve will be there. And for other clubs, I know he was involved heavily with St George and that. But look, mate, I think across all clubs there are so many really, really wonderful people that are credits and good role models for younger people, not necessarily on the field, but as well being off the field. People like Pete Sterling's the same. They will do anything for anyone. David Lydiard is another one.
Yep.
That do so much, especially for Dave, for the Indigenous community. Steve Ella.
Yep.
And like I said, it's a real shame that the supporters can't see the other things that these people are like off a football field, because they're absolutely wonderful. I was going to say young men, but they're not. old men that did so much for the community and so much for especially the Parramatta supporters.
Yeah, no, there's certainly some great names that you mentioned there, and I think I could be wrong though, but I think Stephen Edge could be the only player to captain 2 grand final winning teams and 5 premierships.
Yes,
with St George and Parramatta. So I could be wrong there.
Yeah, like it's like we go on a golf day out at Campbelltown a couple of weeks ago, and Steve's He's a smart man. He's probably one of the, he's a great football. He's a shocking golfer. But apart from that, he then turned up and volunteered to MC the function.
Yeah.
For to raise money for different places out down the Campbelltown area.
Yeah.
And it's just great. And I think that's the culture that people of that era had. They wanted to do things for other people to help out. Like Steve Ella still does a lot for Indigenous youth. Dave Lydiard's the same. And people don't see that what they do afterwards still for the community.
And just on that, how important is it, do you think, to keep in contact with your former teammates and catch up and connect with those? Because I think I've heard stories that those teams from the 80s, they still catch up every year.
Yep.
And they've still got that great bond together, and that's really important in not only a rugby league team but after rugby league as well.
Yeah, well, we traditionally went to the Gold Coast every year until COVID hit, and there would be probably 16 to 20 of us there every year.
Yeah.
COVID hit, we truly put that on hold, but we're just starting to get that back again now. And once again, it's been great. Like Parramatta and the Eels board have really supported us in that. But once again, we're just good mates who like sitting down, having a laugh together, telling a few lies together, and invite the supporters to come and join us, because we just have such a good time with each other, and it just goes so quickly. And that's probably a legacy of that era, is that everyone was welcome.
Well, let's hope we can get some more fan interaction events happening.
Yes.
with yourself and these legends of Parramatta, because as you said, that's so important to connect with the community. And look, it's great to see that it does happen here and there, but hopefully we can see more of it.
It's funny you use the word legend. We don't see that. We just think that we were fortunate enough to be able to wear a Parramatta jersey. We don't see it. We don't see ourselves as legends. We just see as part of people that did something for everyone in the Parramatta district. And it's funny, and like I said, we have no big heads in our group.
I'll just throw a left field question. We've just recently seen Brad Arthur sacked as Parramatta coach, and Parramatta are on the lookout for a new head coach. Do you think it's important to have a Parramatta person coaching the side, or it can be someone from outside Parramatta?
Like I've met Brad a couple of times. I feel so sorry for him. He's a really good bloke. He just didn't get on the day the result we wanted. It might sound crazy, but the same happened to Terry Fernley. When he came through. He just couldn't crack that big one. I think Brad had done the same. Then, like John Peard came for you, then Jack came in. And once again, it just was that little bit, it's a bit like tipping point or whatever it is, just that little point. And like I said, Brad has created an atmosphere there that if when they win it, a lot of the credit has to go back to him. Once again, there's an old saying that when you drink from this well, remember the people that dug the well. And I think Brad was someone that has set up that structure, and it just needs that little point, little tip over for them to get there. And I think once they get there, that they will do a Penrith win a couple of years in succession.
Well, certainly let's hope that does happen. I can't wait for that next Parramatta premiership.
I know, it's been a long time.
Yes, definitely. Well, time for some common league questions.
Yeah.
Other than your home ground, did you have a favourite ground that you used to love playing at?
No, probably Cumberland was the one I loved the most. I suppose the 2 years I was at East, the sports ground, I didn't mind at all.
Yeah.
And probably the only other one was the cricket ground on one day a year, and that was it.
Yeah, no worries. What about a least favourite? Did you have one that you didn't like playing at for whatever reason?
For probably Cronulla and Manly, only because of the distance you had to drive to get to it. And yeah, Lidcombe Oval was tough because you'd come off and you knew there would be no hot water.
Okay, yeah.
The hot water was always gone. It was cold water. But look, I think. Yeah, look, I think that would be. I know if you talk to people from other clubs, the one that they would say they hated the most was Cumberland Oval.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, do you have a favourite game that you played throughout your career? Is there one that stands out that you think, oh, I just really loved that game?
No, look, for me, I like the. I think for me was just being able to look into the crowd on any game wearing a blue and gold jersey and see the smiles, and that was the thing that really said our era, and it's not only me but all of the players, all the years I played, was that wanting to be at a ground where you see the blue and gold in the grandstands and on the hill, and that was probably the highlight of our careers.
Nice. Is the grand final try in '81? Is that your favourite try that you scored, or is there another one that stands out?
Yeah, look, it's a funny question. Yeah, I think any try that probably the one this might sound silly, was one that Eric scored.
Okay.
When he's knocked out about 8 players.
Oh, yes.
And I was on the other wing, and I said, oh, okay. And I think that's probably one of the greatest tries I've ever seen. But once again, it was, I don't know, I think it was just being part of a team.
Yeah.
Not being individual. And, Steve Ellis scored heaps, and Crow and Brett. And I think even Bobby O'Reilly might have scored one at some stage. But look, it became just the enjoyment of being part of a team, and that team being part of a community of supporters that sat around the oval. And that's the thing that really was my highlight. That was probably my best try, was to see the people that would come to the grounds. Nice.
Well, I just looked it up. Bob O'Reilly did score a try in 1980, 81 and 82.
Only one?
Yeah, only one in those years. So,
throughout... I remember seeing him when I was sitting on the hill. And, I was on probably about, I don't know how old he is, but I really got about 10 or 11, and just looking at this fellow that took on the Poms and just had a blues with them and that, and then suddenly you line up next to this hero, that would be probably one of my dreams fulfilled.
Well, in his career that started in 1967, ended in 1982, there was only 2 years that he didn't score a try, and that was his debut year, and in 1977 for Penrith. An amazing career.
Yeah.
Played nearly 300 games in first grade,
Oh.
286 games in first grade.
Yeah.
For a front rower.
He is one of the true legends of the game. Him and another mate that I played with, Arthur Beetson, God rest his soul. But those two were the probably, for me, one of the epitomes of rugby league, the forwards and that. They were just, apart from being good footballers, they're just really, really good blokes.
What was Arthur like at Parramatta? He was only there for the 1 year, I think.
Oh, I liked him there because I could always beat him in road runs.
Okay, yeah. but not squash. I've heard he was pretty good at squash.
Oh, he was, yeah. No, I could beat him and Eric. But look, Arthur was such a legend. He came for that 1 year, and he took a lot of the younger players, the younger forwards, and taught them so much. And I think, in that, and once again, another thing when you talk about the difference in eras is that in those days the younger players were taken under the wings of the older guys, and it made no difference what position you made, and Bobby and Arthur did that.
Yeah, certainly the linchpins, I guess you could say,
yes.
Of Parramatta in those early days. Who gave you the nickname The Brain and why?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know that Jeff Gerard.
Okay. How did that come about then?
Well, this might sound crazy, but I started in 1975, and I remember in those days Cumberland Oval had 2 dressing rooms, and I went into the lesser one, and Jeffro was in there, and he said, they said one of the first days, he said, "Oh, what do you do?" And he introduced himself. "What do you do?" I said, I go to university. He looked at me and said, "What?" He said, "I go to university." And he said, "What are you, kind of brains or something, are you?" I said, "No," because in those days there was only Georgie Paponis and myself, I think, going to university.
Okay, yeah, wow.
And so that came from Girardi, and everyone still calls me that now.
Okay, yeah. Great story. Great story. Well, we'll wrap things up with the set of 6, the sort of like personality sort of questions. Is there a favourite sport that you like outside of rugby league?
I think probably golf, but only for the social part of it, walking around talking to people.
Yeah.
And look, I'm hopeless, but I just enjoy. Sometimes I don't even know where the ball went. I just enjoy the company of walking along and talking to someone.
You sound like my type of golfer, I think. I'm probably about the same, I think.
Yeah.
Favourite holiday destination?
Well, look, and once again, it's also a legacy of getting an education. I've lived in Canada for 2 years on a teacher exchange.
Okay. And
a place called Windsor in Ontario for 1 year, and then Vancouver in British Columbia. And I think for me, I love Canada.
Yeah. I
really do. And it's so much like Australia. And I suppose that would be that where you feel comfortable. If you're Australian, they love you there.
Okay, yeah.
Unless you get called English, which I was asked before, which I took offence to. But no, but I'd say anywhere in Canada.
Nice. Yeah, hope to get over there one day myself. I have heard that it's a very nice place. Who would be the most famous person you'd love to meet, either dead or alive, and have a chat with?
Oh, dear. Oh, look, I think I like talking to anyone. I really had it might sound strange. I've read Bob Hawke's biography.
Yep.
And then probably a person someone who might sound a bit strange, I have met him, was Ken Thornett.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And, I met Ken, and he was a lovely, lovely man. And, and it was my hero growing up.
Of course, the Parramatta Eels Player of the Year, the medal is named after Ken Thornett, which is presented every year. Which 3 former teammates do you think you wouldn't want to be on a deserted island with, and why?
Do I only pick 3?
Well, you can extend on that if you want to. That's fine.
That I wouldn't want to be stuck on a deserted island with?
Yeah. Who wouldn't you want to be with?
Sugar, that's a good question. Oh, look, I don't think there are any.
They're just too good guys.
Everyone from under 23s all the way through were good blokes.
No, fair enough. Who would have been then the prankster at the club at the Eels?
Oh, yeah, well, it would have to be Bert.
Yeah, I have heard that before. What did he get up to?
Look, there are a number of incidents. Some of them you can't talk about, and it is not anything nasty or that. It's just Bert being Bert.
Yep.
But look, and once again, the thing that I loved about it is a place you'd go to laugh, and that's the whole lot of these guys. We always had a laugh. It was always positive. And that's the best thing about it, and that's why we were such a closely knit group. And 40 years on, we're still best of mates.
Yeah, well, you certainly need those sort of players around just to liven up the joint and keep you on your toes. What's your specialty dish in the kitchen or on the barbecue?
I'm still working. Sorry, my wife's still working, so I do the cooking. Okay. I love doing lamb leg roast.
Nice.
We had one last night, as a matter of fact.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Nice. And the last one, who's your favourite musician or band to listen to?
Well, we just went and saw them the other. Probably the older group. So everyone said the Beatles, but people like Herman's Hermits, which I was playing today. Like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, back from the '60s and all that. They'd probably be amongst my favourites.
Nice. Well, Graeme Atkins, thank you very much for joining me today on the Parra Cave podcast. It was great to chat to a player that played at the club that I love, the Parramatta Eels, and also give me a little bit of an insight of before the time that I started supporting the club. I started supporting the club in 1986, so it was good to know some stories about before then, and I'm sure the listeners will appreciate that. So thank you very much for joining me on the podcast today.
No worry at all, mate. Thanks very much for that.
And welcome back to the Parra Cave podcast, and thank you very much for listening to Mr. Graeme Atkins and his rugby league story. I really enjoyed it. As I said at the top of the show, he played in an era well before I started following the Parramatta Eels, about 10 years before that, in 1975. So it was interesting to hear some of the stories from back in the day, and also about his former Eels teammates as well, who we all know are legends of rugby league, and in my opinion, one of those players from the 1980s Parramatta Eels team should be an immortal of rugby league. And in my opinion anyway, it should be Brett Kenny. But there is numerous people that have said that it could be Ray Price, could be Mick Cronin, could be Peter Sterling. So let me know who you think those immortals could be. But look, I really appreciate the time, Graeme. Thank you very much for your chat and your time. I really enjoyed it, and as I said before, it was a good way to learn about the Parramatta Eels before I started supporting them in 1986. So thank you very much for that, and I hope to catch up with you one day at an Eels game in the future, and even maybe one of the Eels old boys days that Parramatta have from time to time throughout the season. So I hope to catch up with you there. So thank you very much for that. Now, coming up on the podcast, over the weekend. There will be some, I guess, maybe some different stuff, I think. I will try and get some different stuff out for you guys during the weekend. With Parramatta not playing this weekend, there'll be no game day preview podcast, obviously, because they're playing the bye. They could be tough. They went down swinging last bye, but the way Parramatta's season going at the moment, who knows what could happen against the bye. But I don't have any stats or player lists for the bye, so I won't be doing a game day preview, but I will be trying to do a State of Origin Game 2 preview. I didn't do one for Game 1, but I'm hoping to try and do one for Game 2 as well, and I'm hoping to try and get some Queensland and New South Wales former State of Origin players to join me on that, either separately or together, and we'll do a bit of a game day State of Origin preview with that game coming up next Wednesday night from the MCG, June 26th, I think it is. So can't wait for that one. Game 2, a must-win game for New South Wales to keep the series alive. Queensland, if they win, they will win the series and go up to Suncorp Stadium with the chance to go the clean sweep. So as a New South Wales supporter, I don't want to see that. So let's hope New South Wales can bounce back in game number 2. Also, I have been thinking about doing some other sorts of podcasts as well, from some of those questions that I put out on Instagram the other day. I got some questions brought my way, so I was thinking about doing some podcasts about coaches, about favourite players, etc. So they came from the Instagram post that I did, the story the other did last week. So thank you very much for everyone who replied back to that one. If that's something that you like, if that content is what you like, then please let me know, and I'm happy to do that every week from time to time, and who knows, there might be more podcasts that come out of that. So thank you very much for that. But don't forget to give the podcast a follow on Instagram and Facebook as well. I'd really appreciate the support there, and also share the podcast amongst your family and friends as well. I'd really appreciate that one as well. Thank you very much again to the sponsors as well of the podcast. I really appreciate that. And I will be speaking to you soon later. I think next week, round 17 of the NRL kicks off next Thursday night, I think. So I will be doing that one, the tipping podcast, as well on the Tuesday night. I will be a part of the Talking Para podcast at 8:15 on Facebook Live on Tuesday, where we'll preview the game coming up against the Newcastle Knights, and I'll have a Newcastle Knights Parramatta Eels game day preview coming up. But that's all next week, so really enjoy this episode and stay in contact with the social media channels. And don't forget, you can also check out the back catalogue as well. So if you've missed an episode of the podcast, they are all there for you to listen at your leisure, and you will never miss a thing there. They are always there, so check those ones out as well. Paracave Podcast hats, if you are still wanting to get one of those, they are still available. Please send me a message on the social media channels, and we'll see what we can do to get one out to you ASAP. A great little gift for anybody, and it really helps the podcast grow as well. So thank you very much for those that have bought one. I really appreciate it. Look, that's enough of me. That was a long podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it. And look, as I say, the Paracave Podcast, by the fan, for the fans. Go Para!
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. See you next time.